Once upon a time, there was a young man named Oliver who loved exploring the mysteries of time. He lived in a small town where his grandfather, Henry, used to tell him stories about traveling through time. Henry, once a scientist, had mysteriously disappeared many years ago while working on a secret time machine. Oliver, curious and determined, always wondered where his grandfather went and whether time travel was possible. One day, Oliver found an old journal hidden in his grandfather's attic, filled with complex equations and strange sketches. Among the pages was a blueprint for a time machine that Henry had been working on for years. Excited, Oliver decided to try building the machine using the notes and materials he found in the attic. After months of hard work and several failed attempts, the time machine was finally complete. Nervous yet thrilled, Oliver stepped into the machine and set the dial for 50 years into the past. The machine hummed and whirred, and in an instant, Oliver was transported back in time to the 1970s. He found himself in the very same town, but it looked different, simpler, quieter, and full of life. As he walked through the streets, he realized he was standing in front of his grandfather's old house. Curiosity overtook him, and he knocked on the door, hoping to meet the younger version of Henry. A man who looked just like Henry opened the door, but he was much younger, full of energy and ambition. "Hello," Oliver said nervously. "I'm a traveler, and I'd love to learn more about your work." Henry, intrigued by the stranger, invited Oliver inside and started talking about his research on time travel. They quickly became friends, sharing ideas and discussing the possibilities of bending time. Oliver couldn't help but admire his grandfather's intellect and passion for discovering the unknown. As the days passed, Oliver spent more time with Henry, growing more fascinated by the past. However, a thought began to trouble him. What if meeting Henry changed the course of history? One evening, while sitting by a bonfire, Henry told Oliver about his dream of creating a time machine. Oliver realized that Henry's dream would soon come true, but it was also the event that would lead to his disappearance. The fear of altering the timeline and preventing his own existence started to creep into Oliver's mind. If he stopped his grandfather from disappearing, would he cease to exist? Torn between saving Henry and preserving his own life, Oliver couldn't decide what to do. Meanwhile, Henry continued his experiments, inching closer to the moment of his own disappearance. One night, Oliver couldn't sleep, haunted by the idea of the grandfather paradox. The paradox stated that if you go back in time and prevent your grandfather's death, you might never be born. But what if saving his grandfather had a different consequence, a better future? Oliver, unsure of what to do, decided to go on a trip to clear his head and think. He traveled to a nearby tourist spot, a beautiful waterfall surrounded by lush forests. As he stood by the waterfall, watching the water cascade down the rocks, Oliver felt a sense of peace. He met other travelers who shared their stories of adventure, motivation, and the pursuit of dreams. One traveler, an elderly woman, told him, "Life is about choices, but the past is not something to change." Her words resonated deeply with Oliver, making him question his role in history. Should he let the past unfold as it did, or should he intervene and risk changing everything? On the way back to town, Oliver realized that he didn't come back in time just to save Henry. He came to understand life's mysteries. He decided to let the events play out as they were meant to, without altering anything. The next morning, Oliver visited Henry's lab, where the final touches on the time machine were being made. Henry, eager to test it out, asked Oliver if he wanted to witness the moment of time travel. With a heavy heart, Oliver agreed, knowing that this was the day his grandfather would disappear. Henry stepped into the time machine, the same one Oliver had used to travel back in time. The machine hummed and whirred, just like it had when Oliver first used it. A flash of light filled the room, and in an instant, Henry was gone. Oliver stood in silence, watching the empty space where his grandfather had once stood. He knew that Henry was now traveling through time, just like he had always dreamed. Feeling a mix of sadness and pride, Oliver realized that his journey was not about changing the past. It was about understanding the choices people make and accepting the flow of time. He walked out of the lab, the sun setting over the town, casting a warm glow over the streets. As he returned to the time machine hidden in Henry's attic, Oliver felt a sense of closure. He knew it was time to return to his own time and let history take its course. Stepping into the time machine, Oliver set the dial for the present day and took one last look at the past. The machine hummed and whirred once again, and in a flash, he was back in his own time. When Oliver stepped out, he found himself back in the attic, where everything had begun. The house was quiet, and the familiar surroundings brought a sense of comfort. As he looked around, he noticed something different, a new journal lying on the table. Curious, he opened it and saw Henry's handwriting, detailing his own adventures through time. In the final entry, Henry wrote, "To my grandson, Oliver, who taught me that time is not meant to be changed but experienced." Oliver smiled, knowing that his grandfather had lived a full life, exploring the wonders of time. He realized that the journey wasn't about fixing the past but embracing the present and future. As Oliver stepped outside, the town looked the same, but he saw it with new eyes. The world was filled with possibilities, and time was a gift to be cherished, not controlled. He decided to become a traveler, not just through time but through the experiences life had to offer. The lessons he had learned from his journey inspired him to live fully, without fear of the unknown. Oliver traveled to new places, meeting people from different cultures and learning their stories. Every moment became an adventure, every interaction a chance to learn and grow. He visited ancient ruins, climbed mountains, and sailed across oceans, always seeking new experiences. His travels brought him to a small village where he met a wise old man who spoke of the balance of life. The old man said, "Time is like a river, it flows in one direction, but we can choose how we navigate it." Those words reminded Oliver of his journey and the choice he made to let time flow naturally. He realized that life was not about controlling time, but about making meaningful moments within it. Motivated by his experiences, Oliver became a storyteller, sharing his adventures with the world. He spoke of his time-traveling journey, the paradox, and the lessons he learned along the way. People were captivated by his tales, inspired to explore their own paths and embrace the present. Oliver's stories became famous, and he was invited to speak at conferences and events around the world. He motivated others to live without regret, to embrace the beauty of every moment, and to never fear the unknown. His message was simple: life is a journey, not a race, and time is the greatest adventure of all. As the years passed, Oliver continued to travel, always seeking new adventures and new stories. He never stopped learning, never stopped exploring, and never stopped sharing his wisdom with others. One day, while sitting by a river, he reflected on his life and the choices he had made. He realized that he had lived a full and meaningful life, just like his grandfather before him. The lessons of the past had shaped him, but it was the experiences of the present that had truly defined him. Oliver smiled, knowing that time had been kind to him and that he had made the most of every moment. As the sun set over the river, casting a golden glow on the water, Oliver felt at peace. He knew that his journey was far from over, and that there were still many more adventures to come. With his heart full of gratitude, Oliver stood up and continued his travels, always looking forward to the next moment. He had learned that the paradox of time was not about changing the past but about embracing the present. And with that wisdom, he continued to live his life fully, motivated by the lessons of his grandfather. Oliver's journey through time had not only taught him about the nature of time but also about the nature of life itself. He realized that every moment, no matter how small, was a part of the grand adventure of life. The past, present, and future were all connected, and it was up to him to make the most of every day. As Oliver walked into the sunset, he knew that his story was not just his own but a part of the larger tapestry of time. He had become not only a traveler through time but also a traveler through life, with no limits to where he could go. His adventures had taken him to the past, but his heart now belonged to the present and the future. Oliver's story would live on, inspiring others to embrace the mysteries of time and the beauty of the world. His journey was far from over, and he looked forward to every new experience with excitement and wonder. Time had taught him many lessons, but the greatest one was to live fully and without fear. As Oliver continued his travels, he knew that his grandfather would be proud of the man he had become. The paradox of time had been solved not by changing it, but by living within it. And so, Oliver's adventure continued, one moment at a time, forever guided by the wisdom of the past and the possibilities of the future.